Hi, my name is Gergely Ágnecz, and this time on Gustav, I will have a short journey with you in the Agile world and I will speak about the user stories. A good user story is informative and clear about the requirements, what is expected to be delivered in the given sprint. But sadly, most of the time, that is not the case. It is either vague or not really informative at all. What we can do in such case, how we can improve our user stories. Join my presentation and let's learn about it together. See you soon. Hi, welcome to my presentation. My name is Gergely Ágnecz, and this time I hold this presentation called The Good, the Bad, and the Agile Stories of the Past. In this presentation, I will speak about the importance of the user stories, how they connect to our daily work, let it be a developer or a QA in the team. With the next slide, let's see where we stand most of the time and what we are working on. Here is a bad example. There is a simple user story with a title and one sentence about what must be done. Well, my first question, or I have several questions, of course. My first question is, can we estimate and work with such user story? Well, I guess your answer is no, and that is correct. We cannot work with such user stories because we have no idea based on the description what we are required to implement and test in the given sprint. This can be due to many root causes, for example, unclear communication, no business analyst, no vision, no business goals, and so on. The other bad point is with such user story that we cannot really estimate these stories because we don't know what we need to do and how long it will take. And if we happen to work with such user stories, we cannot create a standard throughput, a stable velocity for our team, and it is very bad. But don't worry, we can do things to improve this, and I will speak about this in this presentation. First of all, let's see what is a user story. For that, of course, we know what is a user story, but for that, I am sure that most of you are not aware of this invest set of criteria by Bill Wake, which is the following. Here we have 6 points: independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, small, and testable. If we manage to meet these points, then our user story is a clear user story and an informative one. From these points, in my opinion, the most important one is the negotiable, the independent, the estimable, and the testable. I mentioned just 4 points, but honestly, all 6 points are important. From QA side, the most important point is testable, and this means to have actual acceptance criteria. I will speak about that later, but I just wanted to tell it in advance. In this meme, you can see that if we do this together, then we can do it. We can have good user stories. But this meme has other meaning as well. It means that we can do it together. And together is the keyword here, that not just the product owner or the business analyst can improve and make our user stories. We all can contribute to the user stories, either be a developer, a QA, a maintainer, whatever role we have in our team. We all have the possibility to raise concerns, raise questions, and note them into the user stories. And this is very important. And this is why I included this meme, because it has a double meaning, of course. Okay, let's see what we can do on a demo user story and how we can improve our user stories. In this picture, you can see a relative similar story, which I highlighted earlier, which I showed earlier, but with different content. As a project manager, I want to get a new user API version 2 so that we could give back more customer data in a new structure. This kind of description is called user story with requirement engineering, and its goal is to have more information and a clear goal. Here we have the stakeholder who is in this user story, a project manager who wants to get a new API in order to meet a given goal. Well, it's much more clearer. It's clearer what is the goal compared to the bad example which I showed you earlier. And let's see how we can even more improve this user story. We can add even more information, like, for example, an API specification that contains all the required endpoints and the given parameters and headers and so on. For this, the developers will be really happy because they will have a start point, what they are expected to deliver. And of course, we can improve even more for user stories based on the investor principles by adding acceptance criteria into the user story and some more information, like, for example, planned daily user numbers. These information are not really not always inside our user stories, but if we have them in our user stories, we can improve our daily work and we can make the progress and our actual work even better and easier, of course, because we know what we are expected to do and we can do it because we have all or most of the information at least to do so. Okay, never forget the acceptance criteria. These criteria can be either functional or non-functional, and these are helping us to verify and validate the actual feature. It enables the quality itself because from these acceptance criteria, we can make requirements and we can create a traceability between the tests and the the actual requirements stored in the user stories. These are very helpful because we can use these acceptance criteria to identify the main test scenarios and the main business characteristics to check. And by that, of course, we can have a help to measure the test coverage and the test progress. Because if we have acceptance criteria, we can build a set of tests and we can see how far we are progressing, and we can link them to the user stories as I mentioned to see what is the test coverage with that. So acceptance criteria, as you can see, is very, very important. What we can do to support the user stories. This is a bit further what you saw in these previous user stories. This is about what we as people can do to improve our user stories, how we can make sure that our user stories are containing most of the information that we need during our work. First of all, we can pre-process the backlog items for the next sprint before the refinement meeting. By that, we can gather and note the questions which we have and identify to let them be answered. This is very important because if we have questions, it makes the story unclear and we cannot estimate and work with unclear stories. But even before the refinement meeting, if we can get these questions and let's say assumptions answered, then the stories will be clear. We will have our acceptance criteria, we will know what we need to do, and like that, we can do what we need to do. Always document any useful information in the user story. There is no such thing that is wrong to document in a user story because anything can be useful. It can be either a wiki page link, Swagger or Open API specification link, mockup images about the web UI or the mobile application, test data, and so on. These information can be useful in the sprint in a given time. So it's always worth to include these into the stories to make sure that if we need them, well, we could have them. And of course, as I mentioned, always check the invest principles and keep them to make sure to achieve a good, informative, and small user story that can be delivered in a given sprint. From testing side, if we know what we want to achieve in a story, we can create test scenarios earlier, prepare or ask specific test data from the contacts we have in the user story, and of course we can have a clear scope on what to do and what outcome to achieve. These are very great and these are very cool, but as you also know, and I'm sure you know, there is the exhaustive testing principle. And due to that, we cannot test everything. So what should we do in such cases? Well, first of all, we can run as far as we can and don't bother with the testing, but that's not so professional. So joke apart, let's see what we can do. First of all, we can use risk-based testing. And with that technique, we can check the user stories and use this approach to identify the main scenarios, the priority test cases that must be tested at first, and we can identify the other lower priority test cases as well that can wait after the priority one test case. This activity can be done by brainstorming or being in a workshop or in any formal or informal meetings. It has no general rule where or when we can do it. The most important thing that this can be done on a backlog item as well, before a sprint or before the refinement meeting or before any time the actual implementation. By that, we can identify the risks and highlight them so we can enhance the planned feature even more. Back to the example with the API specification. I had an example where user story mentioned that all the parameters of the API must be validated, but in the specification, it was told that it must be not validated. In that time, if we do risk-based testing, and I did, fortunately, I was able to identify that, okay, there's a contradiction between the user story and the specification. We need to check it with the business and developers. And by that, I highlighted the risk, I told them, and we managed to see that, okay, the specification is wrong, we need to correct it. And when it was done, well, we were happy because all the details were in sync. I mean the user story and the specification, and it was very cool because we were able to do our job. Okay, let's see the test documentation because from QA side it's also important. In Agile, most of the time there is a test management tool that is used to track the tests, the test documentation, and the results, of course. The tests are connecting to user stories and are added into test executions that stores the red-green light for the given iteration, for the given execution. Here, the most important thing is that the tests are linked to the user stories and the epics. This is important because in Agile, we don't really work with the traditional test policy, test strategy, and test plan documentations, because here, each and every iteration, each and every user story has different documentation, and these documentations are stored in test runs, test executions, in different points in the test management tool, because each and every test management tool has a different name for this, but these executions are linked to the user stories, and by that we have the traceability to see the actual test progress and the test results, which helps us to identify the test progress and of course the decision, the sign-off at the end of the sprint. Let's see what are the gains if we are working with good user stories and with a good traceability, of course, from the quality assurance side. Here you can see 4 pictograms, and let's see what this means. The first means happier team, because if we know what we need to do and we can do it in a sprint with the short and informative user stories, well, we will be happier. The second, the clock, means time, and it is connected to the third one, the dollar sign, to the money, because time is money. And of course, if we get our answers earlier before the actual implementation, we can spare time and we can save money for the customer, and this is very cool because the fourth point is trust. The fourth pictogram with the pipe, with the success pipe. That means that if we are doing a good job and we are happy and the customer is happy as well, then we will get more user stories in the future. We will get more things to be implemented, and this is important because we have our business ongoing, and it's important. Okay, let's see some experiences from my side where I used different kind of techniques like RBT and preprocessing the stories to get better quality and better progress in our sprint. The first example is testing a REST service to return hotel details. Here, We used RBT with the QAs, and we were able to raise issues before starting the actual implementation. Just remember the parameter validation that I mentioned. It was one of the examples from these times, but of course there were other points as well. But in short of time, I won't go into deeper into that topic. From that point, from this, what have we gained? Technically, we gained an agreement with the developers to keep the testing pyramid. It is important because we raised our concerns, and they also saw that, okay, for example, the parameter validation can be done in lower level tests, like in unit or integration tests. And by that, by highlighting this to them, we were able to reach an agreement that they will try to keep the testing pyramid to have as much unit tests and integration tests as possible to save the higher level tests and effort. This is really cool, and also we were able to identify the most important scenarios to cover during testing, because the story was more or less clear, and we were able to identify based on the acceptance criteria what must be done and how it must be done, how it should work at the end. And of course, the third point is very important from a team point of perspective, that a decision about what to automate, because as you also know, we don't automate everything specifically. We automate what is worth to be automated. And here, even before the start of the sprint, we had the agreement what should be automated and what should be not. So it was a very good example, I think, and it shows the strength of RBT, how it can help with our QAs in their daily work, and with a good user story, of course. The other example is testing web UI of an operations platform. Here, on the refinement meetings, we saw most of the time that there were no mockups in the user stories. There were no screenshots about the planned UI, and we highlighted that for a product owner that these are necessary for our testing. And this means the testability is driven by us as well, and we need to drive it as well. Okay. We highlighted that, and of course, fortunately, we had a very good product owner, and he was very eager to help us. So we got these mockups from developers and from the business people, and we gained from that the following points. We gained a faster and reliable test automation because we had the UI mockup. We were able to create the page objects for test automation, and we were able to see what kind of strategy should we use to test the application. Also, we had clear knowledge about the expectations, how the UI will look like, how the given form elements on the UI will be validated, and of course, we were able to raise concerns about the validations on the UI forms as well. For example, we had a big form with 12 form elements, and the story mentioned that all of them should be validated, but it was not highlighted on the web page. And when we clicked the submit button, nothing happened, and there were no error message about which form element is missing or improper. So we were able to raise the concerns about these validations as well, even before the test automation or the testing. So it was really good. This is not about RBT, but pre-processing the items of the backlog and the user stories, and the raising of concerns and questions to the management and, of course, to the product owner, first of all. Based on these examples, you can see that we can do several things and techniques, and not just from QA side. We can do that from developer side as well to enable the team to do their work as easier as they can. So it's always important to help each other and always ask questions. From test automation side, there is a thing that we need to do, or we should do. Let's say we should do. It is, if we have a clear traceability between epic, story, and test case, then we should track our testing results for each and every execution. As I mentioned, the test management tools are capable to do so, and if we are doing that manually, I mean, we are creating these test executions and put the test cases into that execution, yes, we can store the results. But from test automation side, it is very important. We can improve our test automation framework to report directly to the test management system about the test execution, so the sign-offs can be automated and be faster as well. Because, for example, each and every tool like Jira has a REST API that has a structure in which we can report data into the system, and the system will sort it out and show that in a way that this was the test execution with these test cases, and that is the result of them. So we can automate that as well, and I highly recommend this to do so, because it helps us to make our work much more easier, and of course we can have a much better traceability and visibility of the test cases. How is the daily result, for example, because we can have nightly builds, for example, and these nightly builds can report directly into the test management system with the results, and by that we can see that time to time, from build to build, how the results are going in the given sprint, what is the tendency of the test cases, which one are fragile and which ones are stable. So it's very important, and I highly encourage everyone to do so. As a closing point, let's see my recommendations, what I have spoken about in the last 20 minutes. First of all, use RBT to identify the risk of the backlog items or the user stories or of the user stories, before the refinement meeting or even after the refinement meetings, because as I mentioned, we can do that anytime, and it is useful always to do so. Dare to ask questions if you have them, and document them in the user story, very important, because if you get your answers, it can help everybody to have a clear and better understanding about the user story and the expectations. The third point, always connect the tests with the user stories to see what is the actual progress and status of the actual feature testing, to have traceability between the requirements, user stories, and the test cases, of course. And the last point, as I mentioned in the previous slide, use the reporting capabilities of the test management systems and integrate them with your test automation framework to leverage your work and automate your sign-offs and your daily work, to make it more comfortable and to save your efforts for other meanings, like, for example, exploratory testing or whatever testing which you prefer or you should do in your team. So that is the end. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, now I am happy to answer them. See you.